We're going to do interviews and take you deep into yesterday's car bombing of a Luhansk separatist, Russian-backed separatist leader. We're going to show you an interview with Turkey's ambassador to Ukraine, visit Crimea, where there's a guy who's flying a Ukrainian flag there. And finally, we're going to delve into Ukraine's broken healthcare system. Before that, I want to let you know that you can download our podcast on Mixcloud. We release a podcast of the show every week. And we also have a website, Hromadske UA. There's an international tab, and you can watch this show also live in Ukrainian. And we will rejoin you in 1 second with the show. US-based think tank Freedom House released a report this week on Ukraine's democratic progress. The report showed the first signs of improvement in many areas since the collapse of the regime of Viktor Yanukovych, particularly in the area of national governance. What you can see on the screen right now is the report itself. Across the board, it shows Ukraine's sort of interesting place as a country which in many ways is beyond the countries of its region. It has a vibrant civil society. It has a press that, although infiltrated sort of oligarchs, is largely free. But at the same time, there's a culture of impunity and corruption reigns supreme. There's a second graphic we can show you showing how the country has progressed over the past few years in national governance. And you can see that with the arrival of the Yanukovych regime around 2010, 2011, things got much worse, and the country is now starting to recover, albeit quite slowly. It's still not at the norms it was at in the mid-2000s. But what does this all mean? I spoke with Alexandr Sushko. He's a researcher who is the one who directed this report. He managed it. He talked to people, did the surveys, and etc. He compiled the study. I spoke with him this Friday in Kyiv, and you can watch the interview right here. I mean, if you have a culture that's resistant, or maybe more Soviet style, to that kind of laws, is the legislation going to go anywhere?
No, this is certainly a challenge, because this is nothing new to say that in Ukraine we may have beautiful laws, but the implementation sometimes makes us totally opposite sometimes. So now it's really the time to change this, and there will be. I have no illusion that it will be easy task or that there is some easy way to solve this problem. So the most of problems which Ukraine face now are connected not to the personal individual factor like it was at Yanukovych time, but when there was a integrated and very well organized family business. State was a family business. Now this situation is more complex, and major resistance comes from the bureaucratic apparatus, which is not about one people, it's about thousands of people in different agencies. And also resistance comes from that part of business which closely connected to the state, because they feel comfortable to live in the existing situation when they benefit from the close connection to the government. And this problem cannot be solved fast. Sure. So it takes time to reach essential success. We cannot say that there is 1 or 2 or even 10 oligarchs, because when we say oligarchs, we usually mean 10 or 20 persons. But this is about thousands of people who have this conflict of interests, who cannot separate their interests as public officials and their shadow interests as businessmen or people closely connected to some businesses.
It's interesting you argue that it's more dispersed, because oftentimes you hear this argument that if the country were to go after a few of the top oligarchs, let's say Kolomoisky, Akhmetov, Pinchuk, that would sort of solve the problem. It would allow the state to take control. But you're saying that that wouldn't really.
I think that this is that would be a correct approach if the government will start, and if the people see, okay, that person was an oligarch earning big money from the state budget, and now it is not anymore not available for him. So that would be a good signal for the others. So I think that oligarch, I mean the big guys, is an indicative case. It is not solve all the problem, but for the most of people, if the oligarchs will feel restricted, if they will have no direct access to public funds, to some trade preferences or budget preferences as it was before, so that would be a sufficient signal for the others.
So you're saying that, I mean, the oligarchs are almost, they're a symptom of a larger illness in the society?
Yeah, society, I think that this is, I would not say that there is a bad government and a very good society, because society is widely, the problem is society sometimes tolerates corruption. Society tolerates some practices which are not compatible with the rule of law.
Because the report notes fairly clearly that Ukraine is superior to the Eurasian average in pretty much every respect except for corruption, and then the judicial institutions are supposed to guarantee the rule of law. So, I mean, why is Ukraine specifically in this essentially backwards state with respect to those two issues? Especially, it's interesting, especially when they have a free media, when they have a independent civil society.
Yeah, so this is exactly the case which illustrates the problem of Ukraine. We do have basic political freedoms. We do have free media, and it's possible to criticize whoever you want, president, prime minister, it's not a problem. But the problem is that criticism, I mean not just rhetorical criticism, but for example, disclosure of the facts which show some irregularities or some misuse of power, or some, let's say, mixed interests, and so conflicts of interests and penetration of business to the politics. So there are lots of information around which indicate how many cases we have of these practices. And just very few of them are really translated into criminal cases, into official investigations and the court decisions. And I mean, the weakest link now is the court decision. So as far as we have some changes in the prosecution system, and we have new institutions dealing with anti-corruption, at the same time, in judiciary system, really nothing has been changed. And there is a huge chance for corruptioneers to escape any responsibility because courts are easily manipulated and corrupt. And yes, now there are first steps done. The package for judiciary reform has been voted in Rada on the 2nd of June, but it takes time to implement. They even haven't started implementation yet. So this is just a paper. So we hope this year, second half of the year, the gradual implementation of judicial reform has to start. So this is what you mentioned as a failure, because yes, as the report covers previous year, last year, so there was nothing on judiciary. And then we have corruption, where we had a discussion with because there is a committee of experts which takes a decision on the scores finally. It's not my decision or other author. So the big group of experts discuss. And we were arguing for improvement because we said that there are a lot of legal acts last year were adopted to improve the legal framework dealing with corruption. And yes, the legal improvement were essential. However, it has not affected the overall practice at that time. And this NABU didn't exist at that time, Anti-Corruption Bureau and other institutions. They started to build them only this year. So I think that in the end of this year, there will be some data to assess how, if there is an improvement. But that time, this last year, the improvement on anti-corruption was connected only to the legal changes, and experts said this is not sufficient.
Ukraine's path to democracy is not just abstract institution building, it's also real people who have fought and in many cases died, not only for a freer future for their country, but also to hold a corrupt government in some cases accountable. The journalist Grigory Gangadze, for example, was murdered in 2001 by a police colonel, likely on the orders of then President Leonid Kuchma. His funeral was held recently, this past spring, a few months ago, at which journalist Pavel Sheremet was a pallbearer. You can see him with just when I am right in the B-roll there. Sheremet himself was murdered in a car bombing 3 weeks ago in a fairly striking return or resurgence to the culture of impunity and disdain for accountability that led to Gangadze's killing back 15 years ago. But that too did also not occur in a vacuum. The country's journalists have faced increasing harassment in recent months, particularly after the website, which some say is affiliated with the government, Mirotvorets, peacekeeper in English, published the personal contact information of every journalist who had been accredited with the so-called Russian-backed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. The move sparked controversy and also sparked harassment of reporters, but at the end of the day, it was met with pretty much ambivalence by the government. But this past week, Tetiana Popova, deputy minister at the information ministry here, she resigned from her position via Facebook post, specifically because the institution was failing to investigate, in some cases mistreating journalists, that is the Ministry of Information. She wrote, "I am resigning. I don't agree with attacks on journalists and attacks on freedom of speech by political organizations and individual political officials." But you don't have to just read her Facebook post. Hromadske journalist Natalia Humaniuk sat down with Tetiana earlier this week for an interview about why she made the decision and what it's to get also sort of an inside look at the Ukrainian government deals with harassment complaints filed by journalists.
Tetiana, thanks for coming, and we would like to know, so what happened? You resigned. Why? What really happened? You resigned from the position in the Ministry of Information.
It was a long story which started in May, actually, when Mirotvorets website published data of more than 5,000 journalists. And immediately after the situation, I asked for resignation, my minister. But he asked me to stay, to work at least till August. I had hope that maybe situation will improve, but from my point of view, during last several months, it's rather disapproved, but it became worse, and I resigned on 1st of August.
When you said it has become worse, what do you mean with the situation with the journalists, with if you'd like trying to raise awareness among the authorities?
We see that investigations are not done properly. Almost about all cases of journalist threats or journalists disturbing their work. And I hope, I personally went to National Police, I give some information to investigator from National Police, but nothing happened. I spoke to the minister.
To the Minister of Information?
Yes, to the Minister of Information. He also thinks the situation, especially after Sheremet case, he thinks the situation is quite bad. He understands my position. He was upset, but he understands why and what I'm doing. Only one thing, I promised him that as a volunteer I will help with some project I'm doing now in the ministry, so I will help as a volunteer with several projects.
You said you talked to an advisor of Minister of Interior, Anton Gerashchenko, but really in this case it's really a lot about the Minister of Interior because it's about impunity of journalists. Could you, in your position, reach out to the Minister of Interior, to the President, or to the high officials? What is their response?
They think that they actually publicly announced that they think that Mirotvorets has a right to publish this data. And they think the journalists are wrong, how they tell attacking a volunteer website, which is very important for security in Ukraine. I had several, at least 5, I think, threats to kill my family and myself, and with this I came to National Police, to the same investigator who investigating the same threats to journalists in this Mirotvorets case in overall. And what was interesting, he told me, like, why do you think Mirotvorets cannot publish this data about journalists if journalists publish data about Panama Papers?
What can you do to change the system within the government, especially in the case of security, especially in the case of freedoms? And whom else to talk inside the government if we speak about the decision makers? We can criticize from outside, we can raise awareness, but it depends not on the NGOs.
I think we need to. There is a working group inside the administration of president, or organized by administration of president, about security of journalists and work of journalists, and I think that's one of a place when you can discuss such things. And in case of this last scandal of Hromadske and Novaya Gazeta in ETO, I think administration of president play a very constructive role in returning your accreditation to ETO.
Still not there. It's still not there.
But at least they publish that they think, they check, and that Hromadske was right.
It's still an ongoing process, so yeah, but there was a process facilitated, there was a facilitated, yeah.
And I think that's a place you need to speak about that. Yes, of course, Ministry of Interior, it's a bit different ministry and Cabinet of Ministers, but at least you have one place in a government who can really listen to journalists, and that's a good, from my point of view.
Are you disappointed with the whole situation? You started very enthusiastically with the Ministry of Information.
To be honest, yes. I was not expecting that doing my job I was expect to do by my job description, that I will have threats my son be killed. But okay, we have what we have. We should play with the reality as it is, not trying to create a fantasy about ideal world of ideal ministries and cabinet of ministries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The leader of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, Igor Plotnitsky, was wounded in a car bombing yesterday in the regional capital of Luhansk. That's him. You can see him on the screen right there. Many have called it an assassination attempt, although he apparently was not that badly wounded. He was released from the hospital today, according to reports from the area. Hromadske spoke with Andrey Dihtjarenko. He's a journalist with Radio Svoboda, that's Radio Liberty, who has been covering the region for a few years, and he gave some really interesting detailed background about the attempt and the instability in the area.
I'm talking about the situation in general, not only about the recent news. To what extent the explosion of the car of one of the leaders of the so-called LNR is serious?
Ну, это, во-первых, говорит о том, что конфликты на тех территориях продолжаются, они достаточно серьезные, и между сепаратистами идет внутренняя война всех со всеми. Воюют в экономической плоскости ЛНР, внутри группировки ЛНР воюют разные представители министерств, в частности, народная милиция Плотницкого или армия воюет с полицией и спецслужбами МГБ ЛНР. Плюс даже внутри Совета министров ЛНР есть разные конкурирующие группировки, а сам Плотницкий воюет в экономической плоскости с олигархами, которые занимаются энергорынком на этой территории. В частности, недавно он пытался отстранить от собирания денег с населения за электричество структуры, связанные с олигархом Константином Григоришиным. Какой именно из этих эпизодов вот этой вот войны всех со всеми на этой территории, такого гопсовского первобытного состояния, привел к тому, что у нас в Луганске произошел этот взрыв, в результате которого Плотницкий попал в больницу, сказать очень сложно, но не нужно забывать еще об одной версии. То, что происходит там, достаточно непрозрачно. Сепаратисты могут устраивать различные провокации, в том числе для того, чтобы получить какой-то информационный эффект. И нужно понять, действительно ли мы имеем дело с покушением на жизнь Плотницкого или мы имеем дело с инсценировкой. Этот вариант тоже нельзя отрицать.
What terms are the leaders of the so-called DNR and the LNR on, and how is it confirmed? What is the difference between them? Not from the point of view of our perception, but from the point of view of real facts we have and that could be checked.
They claim that they have common goals and ensure that there is friendship between these two republics. But de facto, there's an economic war between them. Representatives of the DNR are trying to collect money from businessmen who are involved in cross-border trade between these two republics. Plotnitsky is trying to put that money into his pocket. Despite the oath of friendship, customs offices have appeared on the border between the DNR and the LNR. The DNR was the first to establish one, and then the LNR did the same. There is a war over the right to export coal by railway. There are regular conflicts over the railway junction in Debaltsevo. There is information that even the supply of gas to the northern part of DNR-controlled territory comes from the Luhansk region. And there were situations when Plotnitsky used the gas leak as an element of extortion and influence on the DNR to solve other issues that have to do with the railway. Despite the fact that the leaders of the separatists try to demonstrate their unity in public, they are actually in a serious economic war against each other.
Пытаются изображать какое-то единство, на деле ведут друг с другом очень серьезное экономическое противостояние.
И последнее, все-таки Плотницкий.
Nevertheless, Plotnitsky was present at the negotiations in Minsk. They all look rather fragile there. And the negotiations are not only about politics, but also about the release of prisoners and humanitarian issues. What can we say? Actually, we can only guess on the influence it will have on the Minsk process. In fact, there were no attempts on the lives of the leaders of the so-called republics who take part in the Minsk process for quite a long time.
Влиять. Тут вопрос, конечно, там, к чему дальше, но все равно какое может быть значение такого события на Минский процесс?
Но единственное, если действительно Плотницкий выйдет из строя, его заменят на другую фигуру, возможно, это повлияет на ход переговоров в плане
from the point of view of how the separatists are respected by each other.
Сейчас ни Захарченко, ни Плотницкий не являются рукопожатыми в Минске, с ними не хотят общаться представители украинской стороны по политическим вопросам, а исключительно ограничиваются вопросами обмена пленных, связанных с какими-то действительно гуманитарными нуждами, которые нужно решать в пользу интересов людей. Одна из версий, которая может быть вокруг этого события, это та, что Кремль начинает зачистку наиболее одиозных лидеров сепаратистских объединений, и что на смену и Плотницкому, и Захарченко могут прийти люди, которые не ассоциируются с войной 2014 года, у которых руки не по локоть в крови, которые не занимались непосредственно убийствами украинских граждан, а которые, например, восстанавливали эту территорию. Вот, в частности, в Луганске есть большое количество МЧСников, которые работали все время конфликта и до конфликта, и они сейчас представлены в правительстве так называемого ЛНР, и это люди, с которыми уже не так неправильно будет общаться украинским политикам. Вполне может быть, что этот процесс в этом смысле может повлиять позитивно.
We now have Alexandr Hug, Principal Deputy Chief of the OSCE's monitoring mission here in Ukraine, joining us via Skype. Welcome, Alexandr.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Good evening. So my first question, was this for sure an assassination attempt, or could it have possibly been something less, like a warning?
The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission is mandated and tasked to establish facts, and that is exactly what we have done yesterday morning when we heard just before 8 o'clock an explosion nearby one of our accommodation there in Luhansk city. We went out from where we heard the explosion, which was some 500 meters away from the accommodation, and there at the intersection of the Karpinsky and Batunitin Street, we have seen a wrecked car, and then later in conversation heard from Mr. Deniego there of the so-called LPR that Mr. Plotnitsky had been in that car and been injured and is in hospital.
Sure. So, based off of the facts you've gathered, have you been able to establish any trace of a motive so far?
The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission has also seen that the explosion most likely came from outside the car. There was a lamppost that appeared to be the location where most likely an explosive device was nearby that then detonated and damaged the car and injured the passengers inside the car.
And so, Alexandr, I mean, have you interacted with Igor Plotnitsky in your capacity as a monitor before?
We indeed are communicating with everyone, including in the area not controlled by the government, and that includes Mr. Plotnitsky or then Mr. Dihtjarenko in Luhansk.
Sure, because I'm just interested what your impressions are of him as a negotiator before this happened, and just as a somebody you're interacting with regularly.
It is important to note here that the discussions that are held within the format of Minsk, but also as a matter of fact in the framework of our mandate, are important because the dialogue that has been established adds to the efforts to establish normalization. And we maintain this working relationship with everyone left and right of the contact line within our mandate to establish dialogue.
Great. And I mean, so you mentioned the Minsk agreements. What effects can we expect on Minsk because of this? I mean, especially if he's incapacitated.
Mr. Plotnitsky and his colleagues will continue to participate, I assume. Mr. Dihtjarenko is very often there in Minsk taking part in these discussions. I can't talk on behalf of any of the sides. As the OSCE concerns and the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, we continue to be present in Luhansk. We have a robust team there at the moment who interacts with those in effective control and will continue to do so in supporting the sides to bring about normalization.
Sure. And I mean, one report or at least analysis we've seen, we just saw it with this clip from the journalist Andrey Dihtjarenko, is that there has been some level of conflict between the two self-declared separatist republics. I mean, has your monitoring mission been able to confirm that?
I can't confirm that, no.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, Alexandr. That was Alexandr Hug, the Principal Deputy Chief of the OSCE's monitoring mission here in Ukraine, and we'll be back in 1 second. An attempted coup in Turkey last month left the country reeling internally, with many observers expecting it to take a new foreign policy tack. After the country shot down a Russian jet in November, Turkey and Russia virtually cut off all ties. But the recent crisis in Turkey, because of the coup, along with a slow response from the West to condemn the coup the night it happened, and to show public support for the government of Tayyip Erdogan, has pushed Turkey to realign its priorities in the region. There's a Reuters article essentially making that argument that's quite interesting that we can, I think, show you on the screen. In any case, Russia and Turkey are warming up to one another once again. Erdogan is going to travel to Russia this week to meet President Vladimir Putin, thereby setting off a lot of speculation that we're going to see some sort of geopolitical realignment with Turkey around the Black Sea region and the Middle East. In any case, you can hear it directly. Hromadske's Tetiana Argakova sat down with Yanet Chan-Tazel, the Turkish ambassador to Ukraine, to discuss all this and more this past week.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for accepting our interview. We know that this unsuccessful attempt took place in Turkey, but we are mostly interested by geopolitical consequences of this event. And my first question would be about the Russia-Turkey relationship. How would it influence? Because a lot of experts are talking about closer ties between Russia and Turkey now.
Well, I think some people might be confusing the time frame in which this all took place. The decision by Turkey and Russia to bring back their relations to normalcy as much as possible was taken, of course, before the coup. In these about 7 months that Turkish-Russian relations were in crisis due to Russia's reactions, rather, for the Turkish part, we were more cool-headed, and we knew that what we did was not wrong. During those 7 months, it was abnormal not to be speaking with Russia. We were the only ally in NATO the only country in Europe, in this area, including Ukraine, mind you, not speaking to Russia. So now that abnormality is behind us. And this is something our allies appreciate, and I'm sure Ukraine also understands and appreciates it, because it's an additional channel to speak with Russia, to have express our views, and they might be different views from Russia's on Syria, Ukraine, of course, and other international issues. So I think this is how it should be looked at. So geopolitically, Turkey is the same Turkey people know. I mean, had the coup been successful, and I don't see that as a probable scenario really, maybe then people should have been concerned, but not now.
Mm-hmm. And you do know that Russia and Ukraine have some conflicts, and do you think that this return to normality, as you call it, with a relationship with Russia will influence Turkish vision and Turkish perspective on what's going on in Ukraine? I mean, first of all, Crimea, would Turkey question this issue, and what's going on in Donetsk?
Obviously not. Because what I say is Turkey going back to, again, a normal dialogue, a dialogue with Russia, on being speaking terms in Russia, doesn't mean forgetting what happened in Ukraine and Crimea, or what we believe that is wrong in this whole affair. And this we've been saying before Turkish-Russian relations went to this crisis mode in the last 7 months. So our position in that sense will be the same, of course. From the day one of the crisis in Ukraine, we were on the side of Ukraine for its territorial integrity, unity, sovereignty, inclusive democratic process, hopefully reformed, hopefully again successful in its approaching Europe. All this, of course, including Crimea, and very dear to our hearts, our Crimean Tatar brothers and sisters who deserve to live with the highest of standards in their historical homeland. These are the fundamentals of our policy regarding Ukraine, and they will not change, and all parties know about this.
Mm. Speaking about economic aspect of this story, there are talks about the Turkish stream now, these talks which were abandoned for many months, starting from this plane story. And now, do you think that this Turkey stream will happen, will be continued?
I think the situation is similar to one before the crisis. There are different projects being talked about. We have some this and that statement here and there, but the fundamentals of these projects haven't been started, and there are apparently competing ideas. People talk about the Nord Stream 2, for example, and that was the main concern. That continues to be the main concern, of course, in Ukraine and in large parts of Europe, I know. It's too early to talk about anything concrete. We will probably go back to where we were before the crisis with Russia, but even there, things were not clear. We will see. Turkey, like Ukraine, needs to diversify its energy resources. Like Ukraine, well, now Ukraine has using the market in Europe, again, Russian gas, but mostly through the European market. We are also quite a lot dependent on Russia. So our idea is to diversify. So we know what we need. And Turkey is at the same time becoming, in many ways has already become a hub, energy hub. This could be used in an optimum way, which would benefit Ukraine too, it's possible, and Europe, because of our central location, and because we've done a good job of, I think, realizing some of the projects that we have from the Caspian, for example, and now maybe more from the Middle East and possibly from the Eastern Mediterranean. We've managed these well. We'll continue in that respect, but it's difficult to say something concrete about the Turkish Stream. As you know, this Turkish Stream is mainly intended to go to Europe, so it's in many sense a decision that Europe has to make if it all comes to that.
Hromadske recently sent reporters to occupied Crimea, where they met Volodymyr Balukh in a small town in the small village of Srebrenyaka. Balukh is unusual. He flies a Ukrainian flag over his small home. He is clearly a very independent guy. He's been harassed and taken in a few times by the Russian authorities for his open declaration of his opposition to Russia's ongoing occupation and annexation of the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine. So you can watch this clip from the peninsula and interview with Mr. Balukh right now.
Только во время событий на Майдане, где-то в декабре, наверное, 13-го повесил. Но только, если быть честным, сначала у меня вот на вот этом тракторе такая была длинная жердь, и там у меня не было украинского флага, я червоно-черный вчепил. А потом, когда его украли отсюда, то я раздобыл украинский и вцепил его на хате. Скажу, что это не самое бедное село в районе. Где деньги есть, так это в Серебрянке. Ну, просто у людей есть деньги, потому что люди чем-то занимаются. Да, это очень, очень тяжелый труд. Тех, которые бежали на референдум, сломя голову. И понятно там, что желание халявы и все такое. Но они ведь не задумывались о том, чтобы жизнь изменить к лучшему. О том, чтобы сменить хозяина. Плохого на хорошего. Барина хорошего им надо. Все верят. Ну, как в сказках. Русских сказках. Посидел на печи Емеля. Потом раз. Опа, щуку словил. Все думали, что щуку словили. Поэтому, ну, естественно, никаких хороших перемен тут у нас быть не может априори. Аннексия произошла это в 2014 году, летом, в июне месяце. В июле месяца, 11 июля приезжал сюда Константинов. Ну и я узнал как-то об этом случайно, что он сегодня приезжает. Ну и вот так вот что-то делал там по дому. Быстренько переоделся и пошел в центр посмотреть, что же это за цирк. Ну и там вот эти менты меня начали щемить. Ну, им понятно было, что я сейчас буду вопросы задавать неудобные и все такое. Ну и 3 суток я тогда просидел, дали мне 500 рублей штрафу. Ну, они придумали неповиновение. Ну, у них все статьи в отношении меня это неповиновение там, законным требованиям сотрудников полиции. Формальным основанием у них явилось то, что я какой-то там доброжелатель им пришел и сказал, что я сидел в Раздольном, в пельменной, взял там себе 100 грамм и порцию пельменей, сел, и ко мне подсел человек, который назвался мной, типа того, что... И начал ему предлагать купить запчасти от трактора, там, от коробки трактора Т-74. Это тут за 30 километров от нас есть село. Там, дескать, украли коробку, запчасти на коробку от трактора. Ну и вот они по этому формальному поводу приехали обыск у меня делать. Перетрусили там все, перекинули в масках, в бронежилетах, с автоматами. После этого они у меня дома украли документы, паспорт, водительское удостоверение, ну, кучу личных вещей. Там у меня флаги в комнате висели. Флаги эти украли. И вот я после этого почти 7 месяцев жил на нелегальном положении. Документов. Вот. Ну а потом вот это с 14 ноября приехали утром, побили, скрутили, отвезли, посадили, 10 суток я сидел. И вот пока сидел 10 суток, они завели на меня уголовное дело оскорбление сотрудника при исполнении. В комнате вот и появляется этот ментенок. Ну, зашел он в гражданке, зашел без ничего, какая-то синяя папочка в руке. Ну и до меня говорит, ты кто? Стоит в обуви, зашел в обуви, в дом сюда, ко мне, прям в спальню. Я говорю, слышишь, это ты кто? Что ты вообще здесь делаешь? Ты кто, я тебя спрашиваю? Я говорю, да иди ты в жопу, чтобы я тебе говорил, кто я такой у себя дома. Нифига себе. Это вот такой диалог состоялся у нас буквально из 2 фраз. Он так рукой махнул, зашла эта женщина, говорит, да, это он. Ну и она вышла, залетают эти ОМОНовцы ихние, и давай меня крутить. Скрутили, наручники одели, вот как я был, в кальсонах, в тельняшке, в галоши меня еще обули, вот так вот вывели. Потом еще там в машине добавили. Вот это все оскорбление. Не, ну естественно, наверное, я не помню этого вот так вот наверняка. То, что они оккупанты, я им кричал, я это помню. Чтоб я матерился, ну, наверное, когда тебя бьют, может, и матерился там. Я не помню этого. Потому что это было состояние такое, ну, представьте, да, вот в доме залетают и избивают, причем абсолютно никто никаких ни документов не показывал, ничего. Ну, естественно, они это потом все повернули, что он зашел, представился. Хотя они сами там настолько путаются во всех этих показаниях вместе с их понятыми, так сказать. Ну, там ручные понятые, их дежурные. Вот. С собой привезли с раздора. Я для себя принял такое решение, что мне надо как-то сейчас уйти от этой ситуации и найти способы сделать вот эту всю ситуацию публичной. Потому что иначе это давным-давно все закончилось. Я бы там, может быть, еще что-нибудь придумали они мне там покруче, чем этих 320 часов обязательных работ. Ну, то есть, если не работаешь, это 40 суток отсидеть надо. Я понимаю, что им ничего не стоит подкинуть там что-нибудь и покруче срок припаять. Поэтому, ну вот как-то каждый реагирует по-разному. Есть вот люди, которые помогают мне, причем так, ну, реально помогают. Я не представляю, как бы трудно мне было, вот если бы не было таких людей. А есть откровенные, которые только и ждут, они до сих пор недоумевают, они в шоке. Как это так? Что Россия до сих пор ничего с ним не сделала, ходит тут среди нас до сих пор. Понимаете, это причем люди, с которыми никогда не было плохих отношений, да? Вот они недоумевают, как это, что его до сих пор не посадили, что он до сих пор ходит вот здесь. Ведь на самом деле это ж не Путин всем этим колотит, вот этой всей ситуации. Путин это производная от вот этих людей, которые этого действительно хотят. Хотят видеть, как человека могут заставить, сломать, прижать к ногтю, чтобы он вот сидел и не вякал, как они. Каждый чего-то боится. Ну, я, например, считаю, что если мужчина после 40 лет чего-то боится, то значит он никогда не задумывался над смыслом жизни. Поэтому, ну, по крайней мере, мне непонятно, почему люди боятся. Смерть же все равно придет, рано или поздно. Все равно умирать. А как по мне, то прожить на коленях намного паскуднее, чем умереть стоя. Поэтому...
So before I say goodbye, we're going to end our show with our ongoing reform series, in which we translate clips from our reform team that goes around Ukraine chronicling the country's attempt to modernize itself in the aftermath of the 2014 Euromaidan revolution. This week, we're going to focus on healthcare, reforming Ukraine's rather broken and troubled healthcare system. But before that, I'll bid you farewell. My name is Josh Kavensky, reporter at the Kyiv Post. You can stay in touch with news in Ukraine by going to the Kyiv Post website, and you can stay in touch with news in Ukraine also by going to the Hromadske website, getting videos and all the content, full interviews from this show at Hromadske.ua. Thank you for taking the time to watch.
Чи може українська медицина бути доступною та зручною, послуги надаватися якісно, а лікарня працювати без звичних черг? Виявляється, так, але тільки якщо за справу беруться ентузіасти. Це Вознесенська районна лікарня Миколаївської області, і саме тут одним із перших почали впроваджувати нову систему управління працею лікарів.
В 1999 году в больнице была внедрена семейная медицина. Была реформа, и участковые врачи, часть педиатров были переквалифицированы. Вначале базу данных набили всех жителей города и района, надо туда набить, чтобы была полная база данных. Чтобы ты зашел, закодированная информация о пациенте, и ты о нем можешь все видеть.
Любий рік візьмемо любого пацієнта і можемо подивитися, що нам ця програма дає. По-перше, скільки зверталася ця людина до нас, скільки планових було, скільки екстрених викликів, на яку суму вона пролікувалася, скільки коштує це лікування.
Сімейна медицина у нас з 2000 року, і я працюю з 2000 року. Раніше я була участковим дільничним терапевтом. Ми обслуговували доросле населення. Зараз ми обслуговуємо дітей з народження. Ми їх забираємо з роддому, і я заходжу в сім'ю, це всі мої. Своїх у мене 1500. Легше проводити профілактику. І я знаю, заходжу в сім'ю, я вже знаю, що мені, кому що треба сказати, посоветувати.
Ми можемо провести аналіз. До одного лікаря, згідно договорів, згідно звернень, звертаються більше пацієнтів, відповідно, більше заробітна плата. Тобто один може отримати там 4 тисячі, по наших цих, другий може 1500. Тільки почали працювати, звичайно, виросли показники захворюваності у нас, тому що сімейні лікарі зайшли в сім'ю і почали виявляти те чи інше захворювання, направляти на дообстеження, обстеження, так як і ФЛГ-обстеження, так як і гіпертонічну хворобу, захворювання шлунково-кишкового тракту. Звичайно, виросла захворюваність, а потім вона поступово почала знижувати в зв'язку з тим, що вони проводили профілактичне лікування, планове лікування. На сьогодні 3 сімейних лікаря, то що говорили, пацієнти, не вистачає сімейних лікарів. Так, не вистачає їх і вузьких спеціалістів, і сімейних лікарів, тому що на 1999 гривень ніхто не хоче йти. Відповідальність лікаря за життя пацієнта дуже велика, а от мотивації працювати в цьому немає.
The majority of medical facilities in Ukraine function as budgetary institutions. The bill on improving healthcare legislation suggests that they be made into state and communal enterprises. Therefore, the hospitals could make money by providing medical services. For this, the local government will have to make corresponding contracts with them using state subventions. The managers of such institutions must be appointed on the basis of competition. Another important innovation is that the leftover money at the end of the year won't be taken away. The money would be used for the renovation of technical equipment or for other costs. Moreover, the leftover money will not be a reason for decreasing the funding in the next year. Before 2020, the renewed healthcare institutions will be released from income taxes as well. Ukraine's Ministry of Healthcare suggests that the institutions be reorganized before 2017, and then that they stop financing those facilities that have failed to reorganize under the new legislation. The law has sparked criticism in the parliamentary committee and was not brought to vote.
Комітет з питань охорони здоров'я в підсумку після довгої дискусії прийшов до узгодженого законопроекту з буквою «Д» – депутатський чи доопрацьований. І станом на сьогодні існує третій законопроект, повністю погоджений і підтриманий всім комітетом з питань охорони здоров'я, який має бути винесений в зал на голосування, який дає волю і свободу реальну закладам охорони здоров'я, дозволяє їх автономізувати, але в цей же час не дає жодних ризиків оцим корупційним схемам по розкраданню системи охорони здоров'я. І питання тільки, чому він не стоїть в порядку денному. Систему цю поламати можна через кардинальну і системну зміну системи охорони здоров'я всієї. І через запровадження автономізації як першого кроку, і страхової медицини чи медичного страхування, де страховий фонд буде оплачувати за медичні послуги. Третє – це визнання і диференціація медичних послуг і медичної допомоги, а також лікарське самоврядування, де лікарі перейдуть на контрактні стосунки з закладами охорони здоров'я. Відійдуть від штатних нормативів, і керівник закладу охорони здоров'я зможе по контракту наймати не на ставки, як зараз. Зараз же ж бюджетне фінансування, у всіх строго ставки. І шкала фінансування лікарів.
Що ми маємо по факту? По факту, держава виділяє коштів стільки, що в медиків середня зарплата 2000 гривень. Зараз ще менше, тому що, як ви знаєте, фінансування на охорону здоров'я урізали. Що при тому отримує громадянин? Громадянин при тому отримує ліжка, він отримує ліжко, він отримує 10 гривень на харчування на добу, і він отримує лікаря, в якого зарплата 2000 гривень в місяць. От і все. Очевидно, що цей суспільний договір не працює. Як би це мало працювати в реформованій системі охорони здоров'я, і як, зрештою, це працює в цивілізованому світі? Отже, держава гарантує певний об'єм медичної допомоги. І за цей об'єм медичної допомоги вона платить медикам. Але определяє, кому саме йдуть ці гроші, громадянин, а не чиновник. Саме громадянин определяє, куди йдуть бюджетні гроші за його, громадянина, медичну допомогу. Для того, щоб зробити оцей цивілізаційний скачок від оплати від фінансування койкомісць або від утримання системи до плати за послугу, треба зробити 3 речі. Перше, це має бути надавач цих послуг. Очевидно, якщо це є лікарня, то ця лікарня має бути автономною. Це перше. Друге, це має бути закупівельник, тобто той, що розпоряджається оцими державними коштами. І третє, це має бути ціна послуги. Для того, щоб почати цей процес, треба було прийняти закони щодо автономізації закладів охорони здоров'я. Фактично, ці закони мали дати старт оцій самій реформі.